Welcome to the Refuge, a CYRRC podcast to share our research with practitioners and communities. Your host Israel and my guests today are Thomas Sowell, an associate professor of sociology and the Canada Research Chair in International Migration at McGill University. Munir Nasri, a social entrepreneur who's worked in the newcomer inclusion and settlement sector in Toronto for the past 5 years. He built several social impact projects in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq prior to his arrival to Canada under the private sponsorship program for Syrian refugees. And Marwa Kobi, the interim executive director of the Syrian Canadian Foundation and a community researcher at York University with the Center for Refugee Studies. She co-founded the Canadian Alliance for Syrian Aid that supported and settled the first wave of Syrian refugees who arrived in Montreal in 2016. Thanks for coming to the Refuge today. Yeah, I'm just going to start with you, Mara. It's been 5 years since we had the first wave of Syrian refugees arrive. What are some lessons that you've learned in that 5 years so far?
I think one of the main lessons for all of us is that we always expect that integration is going to take a year. That's what the government expects based on the financial support that they give, and then they would cut off that financial support after a year. So they expect that the newcomers and refugees are going to learn the language, they're going to find a job, maybe find even housing. So that's a lot of pressure on someone who left their home. They're not immigrants, they're refugees. So they left their home by force. They went through a lot of trauma, and they're going to start from scratch here. So they need a lot of support in that way. So as SCF, I think the main lesson is to step in and fill the gaps. Whatever they need, we have to kind of support and provide services that the government is, because there's a lot of also pressure on settlement agencies. Like when 5 years ago, the Syrian refugees arrived to the GTA, there were thousands at the hotels and shelter. And there was a long waiting list to access these services, just like, let's say, language or link programs, and also daycare for mothers. It was almost up to a year for a mother who has kids to be able to have someone to look over her kids so she can go and learn the language. So we had to create the English tutoring program. So we partnered with UTM and we got our first funding, and we're grateful to COSTI because they're a big settlement agency and they were able to support us and become our trustee. And they saw our work on the ground. We volunteered and they decided that we're able to kind of run this program. So what we did is the gap that was happening, the long waiting list, we were able to, because of the support also from the community, have over 350 volunteers support language conversational skills. And we would match volunteers with these families to at least have something to start off until they're able to access the link programs. And for the mothers, we were able to send volunteers at home for one-on-one sessions. So this is an example of something that we were able to do and fill the gap within the community.
Before I let you go, what is UTM stand for?
University of Toronto and Mississauga.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Renee, what are some lessons you've learned or that's been learned in the 5 years since?
Yeah, so I would probably reflect a bit on my also experience, coming here. It was just kind of really different to go through a process of settling in as someone who arrived here, with a lot of refugees, while also, kind of doing programs and providing support for refugees. I mean, my probably main kind of observation or point always be the importance of really, investing in communities and people that want to kind of change and, create, kind of there is a lot of goodwill that happened, especially with the arrival of refugees, and there were a lot of people that came together to support and to help people. I think there is so much to build on that. Small organizations, grassroots organizations, even individuals, that were willing, to provide time and provide energy to help people, to welcome people. I think there's so much we can build on that, in the future as well. And I would also just add, of course, employment and education. We always kind of talk, share how, important these two pillars are for a lot of people that are arriving. But we've seen a lot of innovation, like a lot of organizations doing a lot of different kind of programs, and providing different initiatives that weren't kind of the norm. They weren't like the typical employment program or typical education program. Even like
Mm.
how a lot of kind of, they were like, even like in terms of like evaluating certificates and credentials. Like we've seen some even innovation in that space in terms of um, you know thinking of different models to do that. And I think like it's really important to build on all of these pilot initiatives, and to continue basically welcoming more people, and ensuring that there is a path for like successful inclusion and integration in the future too.
Mm. Thomas?
Well, so I can maybe start by saying that, like, we are just we collected a large survey of, interviewing about 2,000 Syrian newcomers to Canada, and we interviewed them throughout basically 2020. So, like, a rather strange year uh, for all of us. And but that gave us still like a glimpse into like how people are doing basically 4 to 5 years after they arrived. And I think I want to echo what Marwa said and what Munir said too. Like, in a way, even 4 years in, you're still like, the process is still unfolding. People are still in the process of
Mm.
building their lives. And so in a way, what we got in our study here was sort of a first snapshot of where people are. This is not in no way going to determine on where people are going to end up, in another 5 years from now. So what we hope to do is basically go back and re-interview a lot of people, hopefully most of the people we interviewed for first time in about a year or two, and then see how people, what the trajectory is, where people are going, how people are doing, right? And there's a broad variety of experiences. There's many people who are doing great, who have like, started jobs and found their ways into life in Canada. But there's other people who are struggling, right, who had a much harder time. And I think it's sort of important to study the breadth of the experience, figure out, what may lead to certain experiences, what are the patterns there, and then see what, how could we really figure out and address these things, either for these people and then also for maybe going forward as Canada hopefully will continue to welcome refugees in the years and decades to come. So
Mm.
that's where I see our contribution here to this uh,
Mm.
larger project.
Mara, you want to add something?
I would just kind of also mention that one of the lessons learned is when we newcomers come and refugees, we always assume that we know what they need and we're stepping in to help, but it's also important to listen from them. So, as CF started years ago, what we do is every time that we have a program in mind that we think it does reflect on the need of the newcomers, the first session that I always do, I co design the program with the participants, with the newcomers, whether they're families or youth or single mothers, to just get their input. Are these topics things that you would like us to address? Would you like to add anything? This also would give them sense of empowerment that they have a say over what they're willing to kind of commit to. So I would love to see that in other grassroots organizations or even settlement agencies doing
Mm.
that as well.
Yeah, I'll just stay with you, Mara.
Yeah.
And something Thomas said that they were like, there are some refugees that have settled and in the last 5 years found jobs and stuff.
Mhm.
And what are some things you noticed while working with them that I guess differences between people that settle easier than others?
I would say I did find a difference between people who are coming here through government sponsorship or private sponsorship. When you're coming here with like via private sponsorship, you know the family who are sponsoring you. There's kind of a mentorship relationship that they can actually take their hand and walk them through everything, their integration process. Whilst many of families who, especially big families of five or six, they're kind of lost in the beginning because again, there was high volume of newcomers arriving all at once. So it was kind of hard for social workers to keep up and make sure that they address their needs, that they are connecting with the kids and knowing exactly how to help them navigate through the services of the government.
Mm.
So that's a difference what I've noticed between both. However,
Mm.
again, I'm really grateful of the support of the community and many grassroots organizations that were established after the arrival of Syrian refugees that helped through
Mm.
this integration.
Mm. Was that your experience, Munir?
I would like totally like echo like what Marwa shared as well, in terms of like the presence of communities and individuals, and like the life of people as they're, kind of building their first in a year, second, kind of just like going through the whole settlement journey, it's like it's extremely critical. I mean, personally, I'm probably sharing my experience here. It is like having someone, that were there for you like from day one, and like knowing that this group, you can even sometimes asking the question, they have like help like setting up a lot of, like your place, just like being there for you. That is like, although like social workers, as Mero was said, people are doing a lot of incredible work, but at one point there's like, it's very different when community members are intervening and like sharing kind of their experience with someone who's arriving as well. I think that can play a really big and can make a really big difference.
Mm.
And specifically people, for example, were born here, raised here, and like they can share a very different perspective of what it's like, for example, to be in Toronto. What are like some small cultural details, some small thing that you can capture, about the place, and helping you like navigate, your own path. So yeah, I would say so, but here's kind of where, also like other programs like the BVOR program, the Blended Visa Officer program, where it's like a combination of like, you know, um, having like the government support and, but there's also like individuals that, and community that are actually involved in that whole process too, and, that's probably super, like, would be super interesting to kind of explore that and see, how people ended up, where they ended up through the programs like that, and how did it really impact their kind of settlement experience and their journey too, given that it was more like personalized and there was like more direct interventions from people too.
Yeah, maybe
Thomas?
I can quickly speak to that because I think this is exactly one of the things we're researching in this in our project, right? And so the BVOR program is in a way sort of it's really fascinating from many perspectives, and as a social science research, it's really fascinating because what you have is a group of people that basically came to Canada through the same path and the same process as government assisted refugees, right? But then were given kind of a different type of welcome, right? Had this private individual support from the community. And what we can see is that it really does make a difference, right? I mean, as people said, like, private sponsored refugees also get this, but they also come to Canada through a different way. They come to Canada often already knowing somebody before they arrive, right? They have this connection.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that these people tend to be more highly educated. These people tend to already speak English or French a little bit. These people tend to have different professional trajectories before they come to Canada. And of course, they will do better, right? If you speak English or French, it'll be easier in Canada. Whereas if you don't speak that language. And I think that's where the BVR program is really interesting from a social science point of view, because we can figure out what difference does it make? What difference does it make to have somebody walk you through, help you through that first year, right? And in these cases, these are strangers who are signing up for this, like somebody who you have no connection before. And I'm very, very confident to say that this makes a difference in many realms of life. And we have looked at how does it make a difference for finding a job. I think we find one of the important things. I think it does make a difference there. And right, and it speaks to a very particular kind of generosity that like you're signing up for a year of supporting somebody who you have never met, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a really fascinating way to program, and I think it's really important, and it really address, and in a way it helps a group of people who need help the most, right? Because they don't, like, they're not in this program because they already know somebody, right? We know that like the people who get something because they know somebody tend to people who have more resources. These are people who didn't know anybody, and then they get assigned a sponsor, and I think it's really a small but really interesting and important program.
Marwa, you wanted to add something earlier?
No, I think the main thing that we keep always encouraging people in the community by, especially now that Afghan refugees are arriving and they have still families back home that they would like to sponsor. So having this private sponsorship program still available, like a family of 5 can kind of step in and sponsor, that would really help and be beneficial. I know it's not easy, but we did notice a difference within the 5 years of how many families did we actually help and reunite from the ones who are still living back home.
Mm. Yeah, touching on that, yeah, especially with the Syrian cohort that arrived, it was a mass, and as you mentioned, it overwhelmed some most agencies here. I'm wondering, what are some things that you notice that we could do better, like with the Afghan cohort coming now?
Now, the things that we can really do better, I think there's a program that we did when in 2017, which is a family matching program. What we did is it was a simple thing. We had high volume of volunteers and people who just wanted to help. They just wanted to spend time and give some emotional support to their families who are still living at the hotel for months. They're not able to leave the hotel because they don't have a car. They don't know places around. So what we did is we matched volunteers, even like a whole family with another Syrian family, and they just simply became friends, walking them around, showing them how to do their grocery shopping, helping them with doctor's appointment. These simple things really made a difference. And until then, I noticed that that relationship was established. Now, after 5 years, they became close friends and almost like family. They kept in
Mm,
touch. They provided support, and I think that that would be a great idea to do with Afghan refugees now that they're at the hotel. Also, COVID isn't helping these days. That there's still a lot of challenges. They have to quarantine 14 days after they arrive. They can't see anybody at the hotel. So there are a couple of families that we're willing to go and see. I think starting maybe next week. I have people who reached out said that I want to do grocery shopping. I want to see them and help. So I match them. We're just doing this on a personal level, but I would again love to see it within settlement agencies and grassroots organizations because it really did make a difference. And these families are just dying to speak with someone and asking about how things are, how to navigate themselves in Canada and access the services here. So I think that was really beneficial and that would help them, and also channel the efforts that like the Canadian public are really generous. They're so supportive. And again, they just want to give their time. So let's have things that are more organized to channel these efforts and have things organized because sad truth is crisis will happen in the future. It's not the Syrian refugee crisis wasn't the first and now the Afghan refugees who arrived. So we have to be more organized and prepared in a way that whether having a database that or forums that organizations can rely on. So whenever they need help and support from the community, they can just do an outreach, post it elsewhere, and they will find the support needed.
mm, mm. Language barrier, cultural barriers is something that affects a lot of refugees. But there are people like yourself, Renee, that are sort of a bridge. Like you are a refugee, but that isn't as much of a challenge. What are some things someone in your position can do to help others that face such challenges?
Totally. Yeah, I think like really to build on like even like Marwa's point earlier, on building like there is so much, like there is a lot of, things happening in the community today, So I mean personally today I always think like how can we be there, for other refugees and sharing the experience, and
Mm,
like just comforting people, tell them like, hey, like 1 year, is still, a very short time to actually feel like you're settled. It can take a little bit. Like, I mean, I've been here for like almost like kind of 5 years, and I finished my fifth year, entering my sixth year now, and you know, and I still feel like there's so much I want to learn. There's so much I still want to, experience. I mean, and like my, what I share today with like other newcomers, people that are arriving, it's like a very, just my personal experience, but people have like different ways of, doing that as well, like building their own settlement journey as well. So I think
mm,
what's really important is to, for me personally, always like listen to what people want, and how they want to drive their own kind of path in a new country
mm,
rather than like imposing my own way of like how I did it or how someone else did it, like because like that
mm,
can really change a lot, in someone's experience, uh,
mm,
and like just the other point I think like to your question like what can be really done better. I think like there's so much to build on, even like I think I mentioned this earlier, but the uh, transferring credentials, and again, like the pilot projects that were there, during the arrival of Syrian refugees, it helped people a lot, accelerate their education or jobs, or like even, yeah, just like, feel more settled. And hopefully we can get to build more on that. It's something I constantly
mm,
try to do in my work as well, to really how can we do more of that and build on, in the future, and while also being mindful of the sensitivities between. I know like you've touched a bit on the cultural piece, but being mindful of like sensitivities between newcomers and like the different kind of cultures, and like why, for example, like I know like this came up earlier, as well, like from people that are arriving now from Afghan refugees, like, or even before, like why is, for example, why are people from Syrian refugee community are like receiving more support, or like there are more programs specifically for them but not for another community. So just ensuring that the service and support is like inclusive and it is there for everyone regardless what kind of country you come from.
Mm, Thanks for sharing that, Munier. Thomas, I'm thinking with your research, you mentioned it happened in 2020, right in the thick of things. But you still got a lot of respondents. What were some of the challenges you faced with actually reaching more people for your research? And do you think some of those people you didn't get to also people that like support and settlement agencies and volunteers also struggle to get to?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point you're raising there, right? So for us, right, because we try to capture the breadth of the experience, right? Like what does this journey look like for a range of people, right? From those who have an easier time, for those who have a hard time, we try to be as representative as possible, right? To reach as many people as possible. Well, I think we did a reasonably good job, but I mean, I know that we probably missed some people, right? People who are suspicious, who may not feel comfortable, doing a telephone interview or things of that nature. People who may face challenges with literacy, right? So those are people are harder for us to reach. And so, for instance, it's fortunate as a researcher, but I mean, I think the bigger lesson, maybe the bigger problem to is there to think that these are voices that we're missing in the conversation too, right? These are voices we don't have in our research, and these are also people that easily fall through the cracks. So I think that's always a something to keep in mind, right? What about those that are the hardest to reach? Those that are the most afraid to raise their voices. Which again, to go back, this is why I think like programs that like the BVR program that match people not because they raise their hand, but because because they're there and they're matched with somebody. That's why they're so valuable, rather than providing extra services to people who who show up at your door, right? The people who show up at your door, they're already capable of something, right? But there's people who are maybe even too afraid and too traumatized or too facing too many challenges to do that. So always keeping that in mind is important. I want to, quickly also, add a comment on what's been said. I think about what can be done better, and I think there's always things that we can do, one can do better. But I think it's also important to recognize of all the tremendous amount of work that settlement agencies and government policymakers and government employees and frontline workers have done in this, right? Like, sure, in efforts like this, where like 40,000 people are resettled over a relatively short amount of time, like not everything runs perfectly smooth all the time. That's of course, right? That would be hard to imagine. But I think it's thinking that a relatively small country was able to, willing to take up, a decent size population at least, right? I think is important. And in a way, right, I think that maybe more important than, every little service being delivered perfectly is like, allowing as many people as possible to come, right? The people that are made it to Canada in a way, you got to think these are the lucky people already in a way, right? These are the lucky ones who made it, who had the chance to build. There's so many more who never had this opportunity, right? So I think that's also something maybe to not completely lose sight of, like all the people who never got the opportunity, rather than focusing on maybe the little things that are not quite working right when people are here. Not to say that this is not also important to get right, but I think keeping the global perspective in mind, I think it's always important.
Yeah, no, super
Yeah,
important.
100%, Thomas. I agree with you. That's why we really do encourage people who are able to sponsor refugees just to do so, because they are literally saving their lives and changing it for good. So we always encourage that. But it's just always in a way to be prepared, because crisis will happen. And Canada is a generous country, and it's country diverse of immigrants and refugees. So it would be great if we can get more organized and utilize the support of the community that we have as well.
Mm. Yeah, we talk about diversity, we talk about culture, and something as an immigrant myself is I'm here. I need to find a Nigerian restaurant because every couple of weeks, I need to eat something Nigerian. Like, is that something you notice? Marwa, like,
Oh
the
yes, for
refugees
sure.
moving here, they want to just retain
A
their
hundred
culture, their
percent.
food practices, and not be seen as, oh, now I'm Canadian, right? Like, you
No,
are
no, no.
Canadian, but
They
you want to
converted
retain that.
100%, and that's why you find many now Syrian restaurants in Mississauga or in Oakville, even downtown Toronto. So literally, when I walk down the streets, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of Arabs now. Like I did notice the difference. They weren't before, but they just again, because they're entrepreneurs, they love food. We all do.
Mm,
So many of them were able to open good shawarma restaurants across the GTA, and other, of course, Arab restaurants.
mm,
I
mm.
can confirm, and like there's no shortage of like good Syrian food in the city right
No, no,
now, and
no,
it
there
just
isn't.
it's just getting better every week.
100%. And I actually use it like through my workshops. I'm like, okay, we're gonna do a program. I promise I'm gonna get you shawarma yasin, and this day, and they actually show up, and the food is gone. So I'm using that as well.
Yeah. So this has been just an interesting chat, but like as with everything that's good, it's an ongoing process, right? What are and I'll start with you, Thomas. What are some things that we could do moving forward to keep this process even better than it is, but to also keep it going? Basically, helping refugees settle in Canada and being able to reach out to them, also supporting the settlement agencies and volunteers.
Yeah, I mean these are very good questions, and it's very hard to find good answers to them. I think so. Let me speak a little bit about the one program that I've been thinking about the most recently, the BVOR program. I find it, as I said, I find it fascinating. I'm sorry if I if I keep harping on this, but I think it's very interesting. Right. So
Yeah.
you have a program where Canadians make an offer to be partly responsible to help to make some commitment to a stranger for a group of strangers for a year, right?
Mm,
And we've been, as we've discussed, right, this is a really valuable thing. This can really make a difference in people's lives, and small things like Munir, I think, made summarized this very well, like showing you around the city, like learning the little cultural differences and all that kind of stuff, and also big things like finding a job, finding a good apartment, all these things that are really important in people's lives.
mm,
Now, the BBR program is a fairly small program. It's a fairly small. It's apparently it's not so easy to find people to sign up for this, right? I mean, it's not. There's not. Canadians are generous, but this is a big commitment. This is a big commitment to take. It can make a huge difference, but it's a big commitment to engage with a stranger on that level for in that for an extended period of time, like a year. And as we said, like a year is
mm,
not even that. From a refugee perspective, it's not that long. That's just the bare beginning, right? So how could you grow something like this? I don't know, right? It's hard. Like one way to growing it would be like try to promote it, and maybe more people would sign up, maybe. But you know, um, I think in a way the very things that make it hard to grow this program also make it so valuable, right? Because it matches you with a stranger, because it doesn't reward those people that already have connections even more, right? And leaves those who don't behind, because it is a commitment, because you have to be responsible for a year. If you make it only 6 weeks, maybe you find more people to sign up. Well, we think like a year is not enough. So I think it's I don't think there's any easy answers here. I mean, that's always what any academic will tell you, and I'm sorry to be just one of those again. And I think every effort matters, but I think we should also be realistic and say, like, it's not. There's no easy fixes here, right? We all,
yeah.
we all need to be as generous and give as much as we can, and people need to, you know, I need to work hard as an academic and study and deliver good research. And people who can do these things should do them to the extent they can. And again, it's not to say that these smaller things don't matter, right? Somebody helping somebody for 6 weeks also makes a difference, right?
Yeah.
It's much harder for us to figure out how much that difference is, right? We can study these big programs, we can figure out, yes, this matters, right? Settlement services, they make a difference, right? So whatever little things we can improve, we may not notice it right away, but I think all these things add up in the end to um, something, right? And to make people's lives better. And again, I
Thanks,
think
Thomas.
the most important piece is like being able to come to Canada, right? To have the chance to rebuild your life, right? I mean, having that ticket, that's the biggest one.
Mm. Mm. Monier?
Yeah, I think I mean it's definitely transformational, as Thomas said. It is like to definitely just to be able to be here today, like to think in terms of like how difficult first of all is to like resettle anyway. Like I think I was reading it was like 2% or something. Thomas, maybe you can correct me, or Marwa, like I think it's like 2% of like the refugee population globally that only gets resettled, like 2%.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's like still like very like kind of, yeah, it's a very low percentage. The big
Wow.
like the need is really big out there today. And there's so much potential. Like people bring so much to wherever they go. We've seen it like in Canada, over like 5 years, like over the past like few years, like the arrival of Syrian refugees, where it's still like very vivid in our memory. But there are like so many examples as well that we can build on and think of, where people like built communities, built the country, and like rebuilt and reshaped their lives. Um, why not provide that opportunity when we can? I mean, that's something I always think
Mm.
about. People are again, like Maru, I think, touched on that, the generosity of people and what people have to offer. Why can't we think of new models to kind of build on all of that, and think of like, what does really community mean here? And
Mm.
yeah, I think like I think like in Canada we're up to something special, personally. Like that's my opinion. I think like there's something happening. Like there's so much or like a lot of people putting in a lot of work and time and energy in this, and hopefully we get to continue this over the kind of years to come, the arrival of more people, and hopefully we get to open more opportunities for people. As like someone who arrived here, like I would have never thought that my life can change so quickly in like 5 years. I think of like where I am today, and like the first day I arrived at the airport, and like you look at the difference, and like, wow, like what happened? Like I want to give that opportunity now to someone else. I want to give back, and like just be able to give another refugee from any other place in the world that chance to like to rebuild their life, and yeah, recreate in themselves. So yeah, hopefully we get to be a part of that, and for years to come now.
Mm.
I,
And
I really do hope
Marwa?
so. So building on what Munir was mentioning, especially the services and programs that already do exist, but we kind of have to think outside the box in a way that how can we support more or in a more effective way. Like let's say the language program that they have access to, which is the Link program, and it takes almost 3 to 4 years. That's what I've noticed based on the participants that we have. They're still trying to learn the language. So why not create something more innovative? And this is a program that we thought of and we applied for with IRCC, and we got approved. And we're trying to pilot and test virtual reality language training program with UTM, University of Toronto and Mississauga, to have them test VR and AI technology to see how effective it is and faster for them to learn the language in a fun way.
Wow.
I people who are interested to be part of this team and this project, I am looking for a project manager, so it'd be great for them if they would like to apply on our website. And I'm really excited for this program. We're launching in January. So we're going to do this for 2 years and a half. And based on the research findings and what the newcomers kind of share, we can take this to on a bigger scale, hopefully.
Mm. What is the website?
SyrianCanadianFoundation.ca.
Wow. This has just been an amazing chat, Munir, Thomas, and Marwa. I love everything you've shared and there's so many takeaways from this episode. So thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for coming to this refuge.
Thank you. Can I just add also one
Yeah.
more point that we're planning to do? So I also did launch a campaign called From Syria to Afghanistan to kind of connect and help Syrian newcomers with Afghan refugees, whether it's a
Right.
skill set or if they have extra time. So there are 3 ways where people can support and join the campaign. We have a volunteer forum on our website, so people have extra time whenever the Afghan refugees move out of the shelter or hotels and they're settled, they can kind of connect with them,
Yeah.
whether it's through language, through just kind of meeting with them, becoming their friends, whatever time and skill set that they would like to provide. It's the form is on our website. The second thing is donation. So I started a $10 campaign because I don't want anybody to feel like it's a burden, especially Syrian newcomers, that they're not able to donate. I know that many of them still have families back home that they're supporting financially, but kind of have them still feel like they're able to support $10 any student or anybody can afford. And that would help also with resettlement services and support for Afghan refugees. And the third thing is to share, to actually talk about this campaign and encourage people to step in and help Afghan refugees who really do need that support. So I just wanted to kind of share that. And it's also on our website, SyrianKenyaFoundation.ca, and they can see the campaign page there. And I'm doing some kind of also press release, and hopefully we're able to spread the word and support us as much as possible.
Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing program. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Munir, Thomas, and Mawar, thank you so much for coming to the
Thank you.
refuge today.
Thank you
Thank you
for
so much
having
for
us.
Thank you
yeah,
for having
thank you
us.
for the great conversation.